those that form part of the successful Under-17 Championship, among a host of others. The Youth and Sports Minister was on hand to witness the launch of the book. Aliou Jammeh was full of praises for the author, whilst urging Gambians to follow in his footsteps.
George Gomez, Mr. George Gomez, as he has been introduced already by the chair of this function, has been an accomplished sportsman, a fine administrator. I know he led a while ago the GNOC as executive director. And recently, Mr. Gomez has turned to be a prolific writer. I'm aware that this is not his first time that he is launching or publishing a book. He is a personification of a perfect role model to any young person who desires to excel in life. So I bring sincere greetings from Dr. Barr to the upper and all of you here present. On a personal note, I like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Gomez for finding the time to document a fine catalog of the beginning and metamorphosis of football and association football in the Gambia.
The book, according to ex-footballers, will help readers and young Gambians in particular to get to grips with the glorious past of Gambian football.
For George Gomez to really come up with a book of this nature, I think we all have to say bravo to him. And it really reminds me of the words of Shakespeare, where he said, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken by the floods leads unto fortune."
Prominent sports personality Abdoulaye Baksture gives us an insight into the book. The book, being the first written history on Gambian football, comes at a time the country's football is struggling for a stronger footing after a difficult few years marked by incessant failure and lack of clear direction. For Grts News, this is Babukar Senghor.
We'll be back with more stories after this break.
The world in your pocket.
The world on your mobile.
Get the latest top stories from all over the world directly from Al Jazeera Network straight to your AfriCell line. Breaking news,
political news,
and sport news.
Be the first to get the latest on everything happening around the world by SMS on your AfriCell line.
To subscribe, type SUB and send it by SMS to 7272.
And stay up to date with the latest news from Al Jazeera Network.
All the latest news stories and headlines from across the globe.
For $1 per day, only on your AfriCell line.
Welcome back. The conflict between Hamas and Israel has pushed Syria off the headlines, but the conflict still rages on. The battle for supremacy between the Free Syrian Army and government troops continue, affecting hundreds of thousands of civilians who are fleeing to neighboring Turkey. As we hear in this report by Nick Patson-Wells, Russia is warning that the more weapons made available, the harder the war will hit Syrians.
This is the slimmest glimmer of hope for rebels. A key base west of Aleppo, not only overrun, but also looted for badly needed weapons. Regime aircraft now vulnerable to these, regime tanks now driven by rebels. Similar scenes in the east near Deir ez-Zor, rebels claiming they've purged the regime from a whole swathe of land near the Iraqi border. Both victories mean the regime is less able to project brute force in the north and east. Perhaps they're also having to concentrate forces here on Damascus's suburbs. This is Daria. Rebels have kept regime troops out, so it's instead being pounded for nearly a fortnight by 3 separate army units. 35 dead on Thursday alone. But that didn't stop this unusual outburst in the capital's very central old market. Women in wedding dresses demanding an end to military operations, discreetly filmed. They were soon led away by uniformed men. Little sign Bashar al-Assad is cracking. Friday he met with key Iranian power broker Ali Larijani, perhaps bolstered by Moscow swiftly moving to criticize Turkey's demand for Patriot missiles like these along the volatile border. A move that could drag NATO into the war, Russia warned.
As I already said, the main concern is that the more weapons there are, the greater the risk that they will be used. And also, any provocation could trigger it.
Winter will be unkind to the regime and its opponents. More refugees, these in Turkey, will struggle in freezing temperatures. But worse weather will also make it harder for the regime's main advantage, air power, to fly. The hardest months for Syrians may still be ahead. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Beirut.
Demonstrators filled the streets of Cairo and beyond on Friday to protest against what critics say is a power grab by Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. But Morsi is standing his grounds that the moves are to protect last year's revolution. CNN's Raza Saya is in Cairo and he updates us on the latest developments.
Although at 1 p.m. local time right now in Cairo, things have calmed down considerably. There are still some demonstrators out in Tahrir Square, those who pitched tents overnight, but certainly not the numbers we saw yesterday. This was one of the most intense and violent days of protest we've seen over the past couple of years. According to the health ministry, 140 people injured throughout Egypt, little under 40 people injured here in Cairo in demonstrations that look very much like the 2011 revolution. Outrage, clashes, and anguish in Tahrir. Thousands of angry Egyptians back in a public square that has become the Arab world's emblem for the democratic right to protest. This was where Egyptians demanded the ouster of former President Hosni Mubarak last year. This time the fury aimed at current President Mohamed Morsi.
We're here because we don't want Morsi to rule us anymore.
It's a one-man show. He wants to do everything, and this is nothing at all of what we want, you know?
On Thursday, the new Islamist president made himself the most powerful man in Egypt by announcing sweeping decrees he says are designed to push forward the drafting of Egypt's new constitution and speed up the formation of a government that's still missing a parliament.
One of President Morsi's decrees bans anyone from overturning any of his declarations since he took over office in June. That order is to stay in place until the parliament is formed. So technically it means for now he can do whatever he wants without any oversight.
I just felt he was telling us, you guys don't exist. It's just me and my people, and there's no place for anybody else in Egypt.
We're not allowing for a dictatorship again. 30 years of dictatorship is enough. Egypt is not going into dictatorship once again.
In a separate decree, Morsi banned the breakup of the Constitutional Assembly, the 100-member panel assigned to draft Egypt's new constitution. Protesters here say the panel favors Islamist factions and ignores demands by liberals, Christians, youth groups, and women's rights groups. Some have sued to dissolve the panel. Morsi's decree forbids that. As nightfall approached, anger turned to violence. In scenes similar to the Egyptian revolution, protesters clashed with police.
We're right along one of the major arteries leading into Tahrir Square. Clashes between security forces and protesters, tear gas, and we're moving away.
As the protests intensified, Mr. Morsi appealed for calm. In a speech to hundreds of his supporters who gathered outside the presidential palace in Cairo, he defended his decrees and rejected accusations of a power grab.
I didn't take a decision against anyone or pick a side against another. I have to put myself in a clear path, a path that achieves a clear goal.
Several hours after Mr. Morsi's speech, his critics were still out here in Tahrir Square, protesting throughout the night, setting the stage for what seems to be an intensifying face-off between the president and his opponents.
And that face-off is taking shape as we speak. One of the presidential advisors has quit in protest, and the Judicial Club has called for a meeting today. This is an organization that represents the top judges in Egypt, including the Supreme Court judges. There are rumors of a possible strike by the judges, which could be incredibly disruptive for this country. A lot of people anxious to see what the coming days bring, Natalie.
In the 1960s, he was an astronaut with Guinea for a wife. In the 1980s, he was a ruthless oil tycoon. This was actor Larry Hagman. He was an icon of American television. He died Friday at the age of 81 from cancer. CNN's Colin McWatts looks back at his career.
Hagman wore many hats in his career, but